Her name is Lillian Boyer. Wait a minute, why is she standing on the wing of an airplane? Well, from 1921, Lillian made a living doing completely crazy mid-air stunts on planes. She really knew how to put on a good show, and she became famous all over the United States. But Lillian started her unusual career completely by accident. She was a regular 21-year-old waitress at a Chicago restaurant. That changed when two pilots named Elmer Partridge and Johnny Metzger became frequent customers there. One day, they offered Lillian a ride in their old biplane, a Curtiss JN-4D Jenny. She agreed, and they headed over to the local airport. Soon, Lillian was in the air. It was the first flight of her life, and she was incredibly excited. Flying didn't scare her at all. In fact, with a strong wind blowing in her face and the noise of the engine ringing in her ears, Lillian realized that planes were her calling. 4 days later, Partridge asked her if she wanted to take another flight. This time, Lillian decided to do something bold. When the plane was flying at 65 miles an hour, she got out of her seat and stood on the wing. But even then, she wanted more. So she walked all the way to the edge. The whole time, Partridge was screaming at her to sit down because he thought she was going to jump. She could barely hear his voice because of the engine noise. But Lillian wasn't scared at all. She actually enjoyed it. When the pilot saw what she could do, he introduced her to Billy Brock. He worked at the Chattanooga airport and was looking for someone who could do tricks on the wing of a plane. They shook hands and soon got started on Lillian's training. Lillian quit her restaurant job and started training full-time. For 5 months, she practiced doing stunts in a barn at Chattanooga. She used a model plane which had soft mattresses placed underneath it for safety. She did gymnastics with an instructor, as well as running and other sports, and she changed her eating habits. Soon, she was ready for a real flight. And she proved she was the best. Lillian was the first female stunt person to perform tricks like hanging from a plane using one hand or hanging by her knees or ankles. Her bravery amazed people, and she quickly became very popular. She and Brock started doing air shows at various fairs and festivals, and she turned into a real star. When they came to town, the crowd always recognized them. There was always a car waiting for Lillian, and she had a lot of passionate fans. Lillian was the only woman at the time who could perform one very risky stunt. She would get out of the cockpit holding a thin wire, which had a mouthpiece at the end of it. She would do a few tricks on the edge of the wing and then hang under the plane holding on by only her teeth. The spectators couldn't see the wire from hundreds of feet below, so it looked both pretty shocking and amazing. The crowd would erupt into screams when Lillian performed this trick. Then Brock would lower a special ladder and she'd grab it and go back to her seat. But there were also accidents. These reminded Lillian and Brock that they were engaged in a very dangerous business and that they had to be as careful as possible. During one of their shows in 1924, they planned to do an unusual trick. Brock was going to do a loop while Lillian was standing on the biplane's top wings. The idea was for her to slip her feet into some straps, and the centrifugal force of the loop would help Lillian keep her balance. But during the actual trip, something went wrong and the strap broke. Lillian smashed really hard into the wing, but she still managed to climb back into her seat. She was injured, but she kept on doing her shows. When she was performing in Trenton, New Jersey, in October 1925, Lillian had another 3 accidents during some parachute jumps. On the first day of the show, the wind took her away from her landing spot and she fell onto the seat of a Ferris wheel. Some of the audience thought it was just another crazy stunt, but it was actually a very dangerous situation. Luckily, the Ferris wheel operator realized that Lillian was in trouble and stopped the ride. The second time, she couldn't control her chute and struck the roof of the grandstand. She hit it hard and got stuck there, and people had to look for a ladder to help Lillian down. On the third day of her show, Lillian's parachute almost landed on a tent, so she pulled on the shrouds as hard as she could to change direction. But this made the parachute turn inside out, and Lillian fell about 50 feet straight into the ground. She suffered a lot of injuries and had to be hospitalized, but she was treated very well. She was in the hospital for 2 months, and all of her bills were paid by an anonymous person. Lillian thought it was probably the president of the fair. He liked her. In fact, since she was a star, a lot of men admired her. But she didn't risk her life for money or fame. Lillian did all this for herself. Brock got almost all the money from their performances, and that was her decision. They usually perform for 2 or 3 days straight, or even a whole week. They were paid $1,000 to $1,200 for one performance, but Lillian only got $100. As she said herself, that was a decent amount of money, and it was enough for her. So Brock ran the business, maintained the plane, and hired mechanics and crew. But their show was called Lillian Boyer's Flying Circus, and there was a reason for that. Brock was in love with Lillian. Constantly working together made the two of them close. It didn't work out though. Lillian told him that there wouldn't be anything between them. But he still cared about her, and Lillian really appreciated him for that. She trusted her pilot with her life, and she admired his skill. In fact, she said he was the best pilot she ever knew. Before every flight, he double-checked all the systems, wires, and mechanisms. He would tell her where to go, and Lillian would listen to him. And it was Brock who came up with most of the tricks. There was total trust between them, and they worked as one. After Brock passed away, Lillian kept doing stunts with another pilot, but she couldn't trust him like she had trusted Brock. One of her signature tricks was switching from a car to a plane, but she never did it with the new pilot. During her stunt career between 1921 and 1928, Lillian performed 352 shows in 41 U.S. states and Canada. She performed 143 changes from a car to a plane and made 37 parachute jumps. But in 1928, low-altitude flying was banned, and so dangerous stunts performed on the wings of airplanes became history. Almost half a century later, Lillian once again became a celebrity at the San Diego Aerospace Museum. An entire section of it was devoted to her incredible achievements. Lillian was the guest of honor at all the events there. One evening, she was given one of the most pleasant surprises of her life. It was a flight on a Boeing PT-17 biplane. This time, now in her 80s, Lillian didn't walk on the wings or perform dangerous stunts. But when she landed, she admitted that she really wanted to. The pilot had told her not to get out of the cockpit. Plus, she couldn't trust him as much as she had trusted Brock.